My name is Malia, and I'm 21 years old. I've loved studying English since I was a child, and by the time I graduated from high school, I spoke English quite well. I'm now working in the overseas sales department of a bank, taking advantage of it. That's where I met my future husband, Tiago. We were going to visit Tiago's family soon, to ask for their blessing on our marriage, and I was feeling extremely nervous. I heard that his father is a professor at a university. I wondered if he will approve of me. "Don't be so nervous, it'll be fine." He was really happy when I told him about you. Tiago reassured me. Even so, I can't help but feel anxious. What if he doesn't approve? I replied. It's going to be all right. He tried to encourage me, but my anxiety remained. That day, I went to his parents' house with Tiago. I hesitated at the entrance, feeling nervous, but Tiago gently took my hand and rang the doorbell. The front door opened immediately, and a woman greeted me with a warm smile. "Welcome. Please come in," she said. "Thank you for having me," I replied. As I was led into the room, I greeted his parents and took my seat as directed. His parents were smiling, seemingly accepting me. Who would have thought that such a talented person would become our daughter-in-law? And you are as proficient in English as Tiago. What a well-matched couple. They made me blush with their compliments. His parents asked me a lot of questions, and I politely answered, choosing words carefully. I've been working as a contract employee after graduating from high school. However, as soon as I told them about my current job, the atmosphere suddenly changed. The welcoming mood from earlier had disappeared. Their faces looked tense. A contract employee, you say? Excuse me, but could you please tell us about your educational background again? High school graduate is my highest level of education, because I wanted to become independent as soon as possible. What? High school graduate? That's hard to believe in this day and age. You are at the lower levels of society. As soon as they found out that I was a high school graduate, they disdainfully glanced at me and looked down on me. I was taken aback by this sudden turn of events, and I couldn't say anything. Don't be so rude. She is the one who is rude, since she came to our house when she has a low level of education. Her parents must lack common sense not to send her to college. Since you probably don't earn much, they are trying to marrying you off to our family, aren't they? That's why low-income households are. What you're doing is disgusting, really. Tiago tried to stop his parents, but they continued to belittle both my parents and me for my lack of education. Because I didn't explain well, my future in-laws had misunderstood my family's background. In an effort to clear up the misunderstanding, I decided to explain why I only had a high school diploma. It's true that I'm a high school graduate, but that's because my parents encouraged me to live life on my own terms. I did consider going to college for my future, but I just wasn't interested in it. I thought I'd rather start working as soon as possible than spending time on something I had no passion for. Therefore, the reason why I didn't go to college is not because we are poor. You didn't go to college in this day and age. You think life is easy? You've narrowed down the options for work by that. Don't you understand something like that when your parents are incompetent? Even after hearing my explanation, my father-in-law continued to look down on me. His parents were trying to place blame on my parents, despite the fact that I had chosen my own path. Not only was I insulted, but even my parents were ridiculed, and anger welled up inside me. However, I made an effort not to show it on my face, responding calmly with a forced smile. While it's true that going to college would have expanded my career opportunities and would have been advantageous, Exactly. Even a fool could figure that out, yet you foolishly chose not to pursue higher education. We can't possibly let our son marry someone who hasn't gone to college in this day and age. My husband is a university professor, and if we have a high school graduate as our daughter-in-law, we can't bear to think about what the neighbors will say. I gasped at the statement that she does not approve of our marriage. It seemed that Tiago was equally taken aback, as he was at a loss for words. Tiago, you will meet a more suitable woman. Do marry a low-class girl like her. You'll regret it for sure. Mom, Dad, you're going way too far. You don't understand anything about Malia. Tiago shouted at his parents, grabbed my hand, and headed towards the front door. I didn't resist his strong grip, but managed to turn back, and said goodbye to his parents. As we got into Tiago's car, in which he would take me home, there was a heavy silence, for a while. As I was carefully choosing my words to talk to him, he apologized to me. I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable. No, it's okay, I replied. Malia, you're always amazing. You never get emotional. I may not have raised my voice, but deep down, I was quite angry. If they weren't my future in-laws, I might have shouted at them. However, even if they didn't approve of our marriage, our feelings for each other would remain unchanged. I decided to view this as an opportunity to better understand each other's feelings. It was disappointing that they didn't approve of our marriage, but Tiago and I continued our relationship as before. Our relationship remained unchanged after that. One day, I received a call from Tiago, and without hesitation, I answered the phone. Hi, this is Malia, right? It's quite difficult to remember the name of a low-class person. Oh, is this Ronald? The voice that echoed from the speaker in my ear wasn't Tiago's, and I gasped for a moment. After a pause, I realized the voice that was belittling me was Tiago's father's. Can I help you? I tried to maintain a calm composure and avoid showing my agitation in my voice as I asked him over the phone. I want to visit your family's home. My family's home? Why? I couldn't help but feel puzzled by this sudden request. If they were opposed to the marriage, there should be no need for them to visit my family's home. Why do you want to do that? We have something to do. His mother's voice came through the speaker. She was using vague terms, like something to do, but it was likely that she just wanted to mock the way my parents and I lived. I can't help but be curious about what kind of life a high school graduate's family is living in this day and age. I'd love to see it, for future reference. Oh! Even though I had explained to them, they still believed that my family was poor. Even if they were to come to our house, I didn't think there would be anything to fulfill their expectations. In today's world, I think it's important to teach you how valuable education is. His parents were planning to make fun of us at our home and trying to assert dominance. I could hear some commotion from the other end of the phone, and I couldn't hear his parents' voices very well anymore. What are you doing? Did you use my phone without permission and call Malia? What's wrong with that? We're just going to teach some social manners to this ignorant, low-educated girl. How much trouble are you going to cause Malia? Aren't you embarrassed? Tiago was furious about them calling me without permission. I was so touched by his kindness that my heart ached. And I also understood that even Tiago, who has a warm heart like this, didn't know what to do with his parents, as they looked down on my parents and me so much. All right, you can come to my family's house. Oh, how bold of you. I couldn't let Tiago suffer any further because of them. To try to give them a taste of their own medicine, I decided to invite them to my family's home. Does next Sunday Work for you? Sure, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a real treat to see how people at the bottom of society really live. With a bitter comment, his father just hung up. After work, I headed to my parents' home and decided to talk about his parents. In truth, my parents had asked me what his parents were like after I visited Tiago's parents' house, but I didn't say much about them since they had said terrible things to me. However, if they were coming to our house, it was a different story. I told my parents what his parents had said to me when I visited them, and that they were coming to our house on the upcoming Sunday. My parents seemed to be contemplating in silence, but eventually, they smiled and said, "I see." They said that being a high school graduate is a low level of education, so you're not suitable for their son. If they want to see our house, why don't we show them as much as they want? While my mother had a smile on her face, her eyes weren't smiling, and her voice was cold. My father's facial expression appeared normal, but the corners of his mouth seemed to turn up slightly, as if he were enjoying the situation. It was clear that my parents were quietly expressing their anger towards his parents. I felt a slight sense of fear as I observed my parents calmly seething with anger. "We have something in mind, so look forward to it. We'll welcome them wholeheartedly. I'm looking forward to the upcoming Sunday." Leaving everything in the hands of my parents, who were chuckling, I returned home. I told Tiago that my parents had agreed to have his parents over at their house, and we nervously waited until the day of the visit. On the day of the visit, as my parents' house was in a somewhat remote location, we made an arrangement that I would pick them up at a train station. I arrived at the station a bit early and waited for them, but Tiago and his parents didn't show up at the time we were supposed to meet. I realized that it was his parents' plan to make me angry, so I took a deep breath and waited, trying not to show my emotions. Tiago and his parents arrived over 30 minutes later than the time we had arranged to meet. They were walking towards me, while Tiago was complaining to his parents. "Sorry for being late. You had to wait quite a bit, didn't you?" "It's okay. I don't really mind waiting that much." Tiago apologized to me. He is a punctual person, and had never been late when we met up. I'm sure that Tiago had tried to leave the house with plenty of time to spare. However, probably, his parents had intentionally came late. "What's the big deal about making her wait for a while? A low-class person like you should just stay quiet and wait. The value of their time and my time are different. Showing up later than the time you are supposed to is just wrong, plain and simple." Despite his father's assertiveness, Tiago raised his voice. After I calmed down Tiago, I started walking to guide his parents. "What? You're not suggesting that we walk, are you?" "Oh no, not at all. I have a car waiting for you." A luxury car was waiting at the station, and as soon as the driver noticed us, he nodded in greeting. His parents seemed surprised by the chauffeured car, and you could hear them gasping. "So, did the high school graduate decide to show off? Don't overdo it. You can't do that for too long. It's quite unbecoming. Do you want to impress us that badly?" Although they kept making sarcastic comments, I ignored them and got into the car. Even when the car started moving, his parents continued to make snide remarks. "What's this? It's quite far from the station. You built your house in such an inconvenient location. In a remote place like this, you probably don't have many visitors, do you? It's such a hassle." When they made mean comments towards me, Tiago started to get irritated with his face turning red. I tried to respond to his parents with a smile. "I'm sorry. It's a bit far from the station." Indeed, my parents' home was a little bit far from the station, but there was a reason for it. As the car continued to move, a mansion came into view. Perhaps his parents saw it, and they fell into silence, unable to find anything negative to say about it. Once they got out of the car, they were even more amazed to see the mansion. "Please, this way." When I said, they seemed to regain their senses, and they slowly made their way to the house. As I opened the door, my father welcomed them with a smile. However, the moment they saw my father, Tiago's father, turned pale. "Welcome to our home," my father greeted them. "Mr. Hamilton," his father was taken aback. It turned out, my father was the chairman of the school organization, where his father worked, as a university professor. His father greeted my father, politely. "I had no idea that she was your daughter. No wonder, she seemed so bright." "Oh, I thought she was an exceptionally talented young lady." Their attitudes changed drastically, from just moments ago, when they were making snide remarks. However, my father, who had heard my side of the story, understood that they were just trying to save face. "I heard that you were concerned about Malia's educational background." "Well," when my father confronted them, his father had shifty eyes, and his mother appeared uneasy. "When Malia was in high school, she studied abroad in the States. She was so talented that she graduated ahead of her peers. She was highly regarded, and she landed a job there. She is now a multilingual speaker, fluent in 5 different languages." Upon hearing about my background from my father, his parents were absolutely astounded. "And you? I heard that you mentioned the importance of educational background, but do you judge people solely by it?" "Oh, no, that's not what I meant. Education is important indeed, but a person's value isn't solely defined by their academic qualifications. We, as educators, have a duty to teach this." "Yes. You don't even understand that. Then, you won't be able to lead others. It seems you're not suitable to be a university professor." "Mr. Hamilton, please wait. You've always had a bad reputation among students and other professors, and your name was mentioned at board meetings multiple times." Considering how condescending he was to me, it's likely that he acted the same way at the university. "It can't be. I've always worked diligently for the students and the school, with unwavering dedication." "That's right. Please. Surely, he may have made mistakes, but his commitment to the school is genuine. Please, let him keep his position as a professor." His parents begged my father. However, my father spoke coldly. "I've made up my mind. I find your presence unpleasant. Please leave." Upon hearing my father's words, the servants forcefully made his parents stand up and escorted them to the front door. They complied, without resistance, and they seemed to have become dispirited, perhaps lamenting the loss of his job. With his parents taken away, the house fell into silence. "I'm sorry for my parents. They were extremely rude, not just to Malia, but to you and your wife as well." "No, you don't need to take responsibility for your parents." I had told my father that Tiago had always defended me whenever his parents said mean things. So, my father told Tiago not to apologize. "I promise to protect Malia from my parents in the future. Would you allow us to continue our relationship?" Tiago asked for an approval of our relationship from my parents, and my father gave him a big nod. "Okay. I trust you to take care of my daughter. Please continue to look after her." Tiago let out a sigh of relief and held my hand. After that, we gathered around the table where the meal that my mother had prepared was, and my parents and Tiago got to know each other. Despite his parents being harsh towards me, Tiago is not someone who judges people based on their education. With him, I thought that I could continue to have a good life in the future. A few months later, Tiago was assigned to work at a branch in the States. With that, I quit my job as a contract employee at the bank and decided to study economics, a subject I had long been interested in, at a university in the States. Before Tiago and I departed for the States, we got married. We had a wedding ceremony, but we didn't invite his parents, and we celebrated with only close relatives. I had worried until the end whether it was okay not to invite his parents, but Tiago was resolute and firmly refused to invite them. "I have no intention of inviting people who had hurt you. As long as the people who truly appreciate you are coming, it's enough." Apparently, his parents had expressed a desire to attend the wedding on several occasions, but Tiago turned them down. The relatives whom we invited congratulated us, and it was a wonderful ceremony. We left Mexico in a grand fashion, but my father-in-law ended up losing his job. It appeared that he had repeatedly gone to plead with my father, but my father simply ignored him. My father-in-law seemed to change his behavior, depending on the person he was dealing with. According to what I heard, the atmosphere at the university where he used to work has improved significantly after he left. Although it has been a little while since my father-in-law, who is a little too proud of himself, lost his job, he hasn't been able to find a new one yet. There are many job opportunities if he's willing to compromise, but he's still searching for something with favorable conditions. Eventually, their financial situation became so dire that my mother-in-law had to start working part-time. She scolded my father-in-law, who was unemployed, and this led to frequent arguments between them. They ended up selling their house and household items, and are now living in a rundown apartment. On a few occasions, my in-laws reached out to Tiago, asking for money. However, Tiago steadfastly refused to provide any assistance. "Pride won't fill your stomach. You should work hard to earn a living," Tiago shouted at his in-laws on the phone, and hung up. However, even though he shouted at them, he hung his head after hanging up the phone. "If you're worried, why don't you help them?" Luckily, we weren't struggling financially, and we could probably help them out a little bit. If my father-in-law's pride was getting in the way, I thought that him borrowing money from his son might be a step that would change his attitude. "It's okay. My dad needs to learn a hard lesson. Isn't he already going through a tough time? If he believes in the importance of education, he should use it as his strength." No matter how impressive his educational background might be, his age is likely hindering his ability to find employment. He'll need to compromise in some way if he wants to secure a job in the future. He understands it, but it seems he is having trouble taking the first step. If his son, Tiago, can't do it, then it's up to me, as his wife. A few days later, I contacted my father-in-law. Even after several attempts to call, he didn't answer the phone, but I persisted. "What is it?" After calling countless times, he finally answered my call. Whether it was his pride, or due to embarrassment because I, on whom he had looked down, called him, it took a while for him to pick up. "It's been a long time. How have you been?" "It's none of your business." His voice lacked vigor, and it seemed he had lost his confidence. I can help you out with money." "What?" He probably couldn't believe it, and his voice on the phone sounded frail. I sensed a mix of hope and suspicion in his voice. "But there are conditions." "What conditions?" His voice was shaky, and he might have been frightened. "How about you try working as a contract employee?" "Contract employee? That's ridiculous. Why on earth would I do something for low-class people?" Certainly, my father-in-law's pride was intact. But he needed to set it aside and take a step forward. "One advantage of being a contract employee is that it's easy to get hired. You can enter a company with opportunities for promotion to full-time employment." Humph. Why would I, in my position, have to do something so lowly? "Yes, Currently, you are at the bottom more than anyone else. What? I decisively told him, leaving him speechless. If you don't take that step, you'll be stuck there forever. My father-in-law remained silent, but I could tell my words were reaching him. Please. Tiago is worried too, so I want you to work. The fact that he hadn't hung up indicated that he wasn't rejecting my proposal. Fine, he said, and hung up the phone. About a month later, Tiago received a phone call from his mother. Worried about his parents, Tiago answered the phone with a concerned look. However, after exchanging a few words, Tiago's expression brightened. When he hung up the phone, he turned to me with a big smile. My dad has got a job. I'm so glad. Perhaps he was relieved and sat down on the couch. So, what kind of job did he get? He will be a school janitor. And guess what? He's a contract employee. I'm surprised. It seems he accepted my conditions and took a step forward as a contract employee. While my father-in-law will face some challenges ahead, it will be a valuable experience. I believe it won't be too long before Tiago and my in-laws reconcile.